Geetha Sadhana Sopaana. Swami AtmaanandEndra Saraswatee SwAmeeji has written this book, published by Adhyatma Prakasha Karyalaya, Narsipur. In this, today we are going to see in that PDF, Geetha Sadhana Sopaana, page number 68. That is item number 1.11. Re-examination of the one yoga taught in the Geetha. Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha Harihi Om Shri Ganeshaya Namaha. With this background, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, we can re-examine why we should take it that the Gita has instructed us in only one yoga, as exemplified in verses 4th chapter 1 to 3, 42nd, 6th chapter 16 to 17, 23, 33, 36, 44, and 18th chapter 75th shloka in Bhagavad Gita. The main purport of the teaching, which was termed Sankhya, meaning inquiry leading to complete and correct knowledge, is yoga. Because at this stage, the inquiry has completely eliminated all anatma, not self. The sense of agency for all actions would have disappeared. Naishkarmya. Since in the absence of identification with any item of not self, mutual superimposition between the real self and the unreal not self becomes impossible. This stage is also referred to as Naishkarmya Siddhi, 18.49 Bhagavad Gita, which is declared to directly lead to the absolute Brahman. The similarities between the Gita and the Upanishads, see also Vishnu Purana 6.7.31, have been well noticed by researchers. The Gita is popularly referred to as the milk or nectar of the Upanishads. Sarvopanishado gavo dogdha gopalanandana partho vatsa sudhir bhokta dugdham geetamtam mahat. Amritam, nectar, dugdham, milk. Particular reference may be made to the Kathopanishad, with which the Gita exhibits a striking resemblance. In that Upanishad, Lord Yama, while answering the question of Nachiketas, mentions yoga as being the state in which the senses have been completely brought under control by a process almost identical to that as mentioned in the concluding verses in chapter 3 of the Gita. This partly answers the other question with which we started our inquiry, that is, whether the Gita contains many parallel paths, any or all of which form an independent path to reach the ultimate goal. Because the whole illusion and the ills of samsara arise only in a condition of non-discrimination, aviveka. It stands to reason that discrimination alone will lead to the elimination of the illusion, viveka, sadasad viveka, nitya nitya vastu viveka, and that all other practices must lead to this discriminative state. That all other practices must lead to this discriminative state. So that is the ultimate state. Devoid of discrimination, none can attain knowledge, which in fact merely means the removal of our ignorance. Discrimination means removal of ignorance. This explains why the other practices found in the Gita are also called yoga only in a secondary sense, in that they lead to the real yoga in the primary sense, and why in that they lead to the real yoga in the primary sense. They are not the primary yoga. And why in the beginning of chapter 5 of the Gita, both Sankhya and Yoga are said to lead to the same goal. In other words, these practice because the same goal means they will again reach to Sankhya. Yogis also later will reach to the Sankhya stage. That's why same goal they will reach. In other words, these practices must telescope into each other, forming an unbroken sequence leading to the final discriminative practice and goal, and they do not constitute independent paths in and of themselves. A doubt naturally arises in this case as to why everybody should not resort to Sankhya, discriminative wisdom alone, and why anybody should go through any other practice. Fortunately for us, Arjuna has already raised this doubt in verses 3.1 and 3.2 of Bhagavad Gita, which the Lord has clarified, leaving no scope for confusion. The reason is to be attributed to the previous karmas that we have brought with ourselves from the past, depending on the composition of the three gunas constituting our nature. We have certain innate propensities which shroud our real nature and create for us a state of illusion and unhappiness. 5.15 Bhagavad Gita. All inquiries must necessarily be conducted in the mind, and these inherited propensities make the mind gross and distracted, depending upon whether the quality of tamas or rajas predominates. The very exalted nature of this most subtle discrimination demands a clean, stable, introvert, and subtle mind. Not being in possession of such a mind is the reason not all of us can take shelter under this type of discrimination directly, unless we provide ourselves with a clean mind by having done the previous preparation to cleanse it of all its dross and distractions. This discriminative practice will not be possible. As the Gita teaches, that having taken his seat, he should apply himself to yoga, making his mind one pointed and controlling the activities of the mind and senses. One should apply himself to yoga for the purification of the mind. 6.12 Bhagavad Gita. The dirt to be removed is of two kinds. First, a person may be completely oblivious to the need to put in any effort to get over samsara, and even an occasional flash of such a need may be curbed by sloth. When a stroke of good luck, some practice When by a stroke of good luck some practice is resorted to, the effort may be directed in such a way that it will lead to an entirely opposite result because the mind is steeped in tamas. Secondly, if the mind is not clogged with this tamas, ambitions may drag it in 1,000 directions, not allowing it to settle on anything for any length of time, nor with any amount of steadiness. Desires can be innumerable, each goading the person to involve himself in constant but mostly unproductive or conflicting activities. This is rajas. This is evident. That is vyavasayatmika buddhi ekeha kurunandana. Okay. Otherwise, it is buddhayo avyavasayinam, bhavushaka kyanantascha. Buddhayo avyavasayinam. It is evident that both tamas in preventing one from undertaking the spiritual practices required and from comprehending anything about them in their correct perspective, and rajas in creating distractions by way of desires, are clear obstacles for one wanting to get rid of samsara. As a matter of fact, these two are the gross fetters that bind us to samsara. Since tamas is characterized by inactivity and misapprehension of things, it is, that's ajnana. It is easy to see that it has to be overcome through activity, by which means one gets entangled in the tentacles of rajas. If a person does not act, he gets immured in tamas, and if he acts, he gets into the snare of rajas, thus apparently leading to a situation of being left with no good options. That is where the beauty of the teaching of the Gita lies. Work one must, but work should be an aid in relief from our bondage and not for prolonging it. Perhaps nowhere else in the whole of the world's philosophical literature does one come to find the concept of action without desire for its fruits, Naishkarmya or Nishkama Karma, expounded as beautifully as in the Gita. Since the bondage of Rajas is rooted in the desire to obtain the results of karma, the only solution to subdue Rajas is to perform karma without attachment to its fruit. Phalabhisandirahita Karma Yoga. It is easy for a thinker to realize the rationale behind the instruction not to be attached to the result of action. In the Gita, dexterity in karma has been declared to be yoga. When a task has been well performed and efficiently completed, the doer automatically gets a pleasant satisfaction, which in itself is a result of the performance of that karma. To expect the fruit of the action also, in addition to this tangible result of a pleasant satisfaction, will make us, in fact, misery, kripana, in that we would be demanding an unfair double return for the karma. In other words, the well-performed action contains its own satisfaction and that should be our sufficient reward. Secondly, even if a person has not reached the stage of performing all activities depending on the Lord completely, and without attachment to the fruit of that activity, we can still take note of the fact that for the accomplishment of any work, five things are required: the body, the doer, the different aids, such as the senses, the life functions, and the deity, which presides over a particular sense organ, for instance, the sun for the eye. Since without the grace of the deity, work is impossible, and that deity becomes an indispensable factor in any karma. By noting this fact, a person should not expect the whole fruit of any activity of which he has not the sole performer. For a common man, however, this may look impossible, since without an incentive for the fruit, it seems that no rational person will engage himself in any activity. Namandopi pravartate. So, in this context, it should not be forgotten that the Gita addresses itself to a sincere seeker who only wants to transcend samsara, and definitely not to the person who is enmeshed in it and wants it to continue. But whether we anticipate the result or not, inasmuch as anticipating the fruit is only to add to the natural defect in karmas, to bind its doer to its result, the result will have to be experienced anyway. In order to experience all the results of innumerable karmas, one will have to go through repeated births, thus defeating the very purpose of the exercise, which was to completely get rid of samsara. In this context, the Lord points out there are three fruits of karma in the form of the desirable, the undesirable, and the mixed. They accrue to those who have not renounced them after going away from here, but never to sannyasins, the renouncers. 18.12 Bhagavad Gita. While those who cast off the gross body, not renouncing the fruits of karma, have to be reborn in order to experience the fruits, but those who have renounced the fruits of karma still have to enjoy the experiences of the present body, since the body is the product of the past karma and they have not entirely imputed the current body as non-existent. On the contrary, in the case of sannyasins, there is at no stage of the karma any identification with it, with the body performing it, or with the fruit of the karma, even though others may consider him as living, acting, or dying. Even when the practitioner overcomes rajas through desireless actions, purity of mind, sattva, remains as the golden fetters. The bondage which is still lurking due to the desire to enjoy the happiness that one gets in that sattvic state and to bask in the glory of his scriptural knowledge. This Shastra Vasana, this attachment cannot be divided or cannot be avoided as long as the fruit of the karma is with us. And so the Lord has ordained that karma must be undertaken as his worship, Bhagavadarpana Karma Yoga, and surrendering the fruit of action with all its ramifications at his feet and not having even a trace of attachment at any stage from the volition to do the action, the performance of the action, as well as the enjoyment of the result of that action at any stage. Since any desire for personal benefit should be completely absent, it is obvious that karmas involving desire, kamya karmas, are to be eschewed and activity should be limited merely to obligatory duties that come in nitya karma, the natural course of events. Even these duties are to be performed with the absolute absence of identification, so that virtually or effectively they are no karmas at all. It is to be noted that this is natural to a person who is the highest aspirant. He has reached this highest stage due to a constant discrimination and devotion, and it is not a deliberate attempt at casting away karma, since these karmas are accepted as inescapable duties coming to our lot as a result of our past deeds. There is no mental torment regarding them, neither hatred because of the feeling that they are undesirable, nor exhilaration because of the feeling of their being desirable. Therefore, even the activities of others cease to evoke any reaction in such an aspirant, such as the desire to wreak vengeance. We should also note that when once the person exhibits no attachment to the fruits of karma, either anticipating its result or feeling exhilarated when actually experiencing such a result, then happenings in the external world will leave no impression on his mind. A type of non-attachment to the whole world ensues. Hence the injunction, be free from the pairs of opposites, ragadvesha, always or dvandvatito vimatsaraha, established in sattva, not striving to acquire what is not possessed, nor to hold what is in possession. As a matter of fact, the need to overcome the pairs of opposites, comfort and discomfort, respect and contempt, profit and loss, etc., pervades the whole of the Geetha, even to the extent of concluding that all the ills of the world are a direct product of these pairs of opposites. Sarvam Dvandvatmakam Jagat. O Bharata, all beings in creation get confounded by the delusion of the pairs of opposites, born of attachment and aversion, ragadvesha. This, in brief, is the state wherein the karmas are said to be no karmas and is referred to as Naishkarmya by the Lord. The culmination of Naishkarmya is referred to as Naishkarmya Siddhi or Sankhya or establishment in knowledge, Jnananistha. Verse 18.50 makes it very clear that this Naishkarmya Siddhi is very different from Nishkama Karma, and that it is this Naishkarmya Siddhi that is the direct stepping stone for the knowledge of Brahman. The function of Nishkama Karma is merely limited to the elimination of Rajas. In this context, we can clearly see that what is taught in the Gita is not renunciation of action, but renunciation in action. Renunciation in action, not of action. Therefore, those portions of the Gita that appear like parallel sadhanas will be reconciled only if understood correctly, wherein each sadhana is seen as telescoping one into the other. So, in the next session, we shall continue. That's page number 76. 1.12, that is a element or the item. The import of verse 2.47 of the Geetha. That we shall see in the next session. Hare Ram, Hare Krishna, Sadguru Charanarpitamatsu Sarve Janaः Sukhino Bhavantu Lokaः Samastah Sukhino Bhavantu Sajjanaः Santu Nirbhayaः. Om Tat Sat. Shri Krishna Arpanamastu. Sadguru Charanarpitamastu.